All right, next verse. All objects, whether perceived as external or internal, arise in unconditioned awareness. All objects are pointers to awareness. We talked about this, which is revealed when the mind's fascination with objects is relinquished. We're fascinated with what we perceive. And your average person's entire life is run around to satisfy their senses, if you really think about it. An enlightened person knows that everything they're sensing is actually pointers or can be used instead of satisfying them, can be used as pointers to the awareness, proof of existence and awareness itself. True nature is the next verse. True nature is unconditioned, unchanging, and unlimited by space, time, name, or form. Now, again, this is an old text, so space and time are listed separately. We know better now that space time is one thing, so let's change it to unlimited by space, time, name, or form. Uninterrupted inquiry upon awareness, in which every object arises, reveals the unconditioned, unchanging, and unlimited nature of awareness. All right, so he's just saying technique, focus on awareness itself, and eventually you'll see the unchanging, unlimited nature of it. You'll experience it for yourself instead of just taking our word for it. The mind remains undistracted by arising objects when the unconditioned, unchanging, and unlimited nature of awareness is recognized. Then one awakens to the pure being, bliss, and equanimity of awareness. This is kind of where that bliss portion comes in, and it's nothing you can explain. It's just something you have to experience. Um, you can philosophically talk about pure existence, how everything really is just existence itself. You can talk about that. You can talk about how everything really is just awareness itself, but the bliss component is not. It just there's no philosophical proof that I've come across that actually makes a lot of sense. The Taittiriya Upanishad does a great job when it starts talking about the five sheaths of reality, and it gets to the Anandamaya Kosha, but it's it's not a philosophical proof, right? It only makes sense after the fact. You had to have experienced this quote unquote bliss, and by bliss, it's not like a super. It doesn't feel like any joy that you've experienced with real stuff like, hey, I ate this ice cream and this ice cream tastes great, I'm not happy. Hey, this girl I like or this guy I like told me that they love me, right? It doesn't feel like that. Actually, those real world, I'm calling it the real world as we've just proven it's not real, material world, or this objectified projected world, um, there's nothing in it that actually equates. A lot of people say, "Oh, the joy from seeing my firstborn child," and all of those things. Those are amazing, but they're a drop in the bucket. I mean, they're pitiful. Let's face it, in comparison to what he's referring to as bliss here. Just pitiful. That whole, you've achieved, you got the promotion, you won the lottery, and you had a son all in the same day. I assure you, as happy as you would be at that moment, it is a pitiful level compared to what he's referring to as bliss. Bliss isn't even in the right word. It's a euphoria, but you can't explain it. You can't explain it. It's just something you've gotta experience. All right, so when absorption in awareness is steady and uninterrupted for a long time, establishment, a long time, so a long samadhi experience, establishment in non separate awareness is close at hand. So, what he's saying is you've got to be in this pseudo high state for a long time. What happens is initially is we get these experiences and then we eventually come down and our suspension of disbelief kicks in again and we start playing this character in this reality that we've created once again. And then we go back to the stuff and it comes back again. I've even unsuccessfully chased it like a drug addict when I've come down from a samadhi experience on what can I do to get it back? Oh my gosh. And it doesn't work that way either. But when you've been able to be absorbed in knowing the difference between the real and the unreal, and all there is awareness for a long enough time, at that point he's saying establishment of non-separate awareness is close at hand. Inquire through the 6 stages of absorption, again, samadhi, which gives rise to awakening to the truth of non-separate awareness. So after you've been in this state for a long time, is when you realize that what we're now calling real versus unreal, this projected reality that we're saying is not real compared to the reality of what is awareness, eventually you will come to the conclusion and realize that they're not 2 separate things. They're one and the same thing. Okay, next verse. I actually can't go on that any further in words. I know some people are beating their heads against the wall trying to figure out what exactly I just said there. But don't try to wrap your head around it. That would be a mistake. Again, that's using your mind to grasp something that has actually to do with an awareness outside of your mind. Okay, next verse. All external and internal objects are changing. We know this. World, body, senses, and mind. All changing objects appear and disappear in unchanging awareness. We know this already. He's repeating himself. When the understanding of essential nature is unchanging, as unchanging awareness arises, identification with changing object ceases. Through meditative inquiry, all objects are realized to be expressions of, and therefore not separate from, the unchanging awareness. Constant abiding in this realization of the truth of oneness reveals that everything is only an expression of unchanging awareness. So, a very light example is what we were talking about, how when we say this tablet doesn't exist, existence has taken form of this tablet. There actually is nothing but existence. So, inclusive, we'll come to the realization that it's not like there's this trickery called Maya and the powers of your mind that are creating a fake reality out of over on top of what is really nothing more than existence itself or awareness itself. You'll see that it's all one and the same thing, and it can be no other way. Next verse. Constant abiding as awareness dissolves all misperceptions. Then the heart opens, all doubts are resolved, suffering ceases, and there is liberation from the notion of being a separate self. Next verse. These verses are getting self-explanatory. You may not believe what they're saying at this point, which is why I'm not really expounding on them. Um, if you've gone along with what we're saying and you've actually um, experienced what each verse is alluding to, you will. It's starting to get a little self-explanatory. Next verse. What is the nature of the separate self? When awareness is realized to be all that there is, that awareness is ultimate reality. The separate self is realized to be only a mental concept. We've talked about this. The individual sense of self only appears to be separate and limited because of the way the mind categorizes and conceptualizes perceptions. We've talked about that as well. This misperception of the I self as a separate and limited individual occurs both in the waking and the dream states. We've talked about that as well. Next verse. The belief of separation, which engenders the notion of confusion, imperfection, limitation, is based on the mental misperception of the mind. He calls it mental misperception, but let's face it, it's a pretty awesome power of the mind to be able to project a reality and then convince itself that it's not projecting that reality. He calls it a misperception. I call it a power. It's pretty amazing, which takes itself to be a separate self. But awareness is ever free of such a division. It is always whole and undivided, being devoid of parts or separation. Ultimate reality is omnipresent, unlimited, complete, timeless, and all-pervasive under all circumstances and at all times. All circumstances and at all times is a little misleading because both circumstances and space-time, as we've seen, are all concepts. It has no meaning in this ultimate reality, this awareness itself. To say awareness, to ask the question when or where is awareness is like asking if the number 9 is happy, right? Those concepts just don't exist. It just doesn't pertain.